Good morning, my friends and family out there. Straighten my brim again. You notice that I don't take myself too seriously. When we do, we get ourselves into trouble. I'd like to come on and present this information as some kind of fact and be professional about it, and could have a nice backdrop and explaining my points and cutaways and stories. No, that's not what's going to happen. This is just me and my notebook. But I find this is really important stuff to me, and I just wanted to share it with anyone who cared. I have this book of ideas, if you will. I mean, it's just my theories, ideas, things I've had in my mind. And I was reading a little bit the other day, and somehow I got watching a show about Edward Leedskalnin, which was the guy who built Coral Castle. And Coral Castle is, of course, for those who don't know, it's a place where, it's in Florida, and it's a place where this guy named Edward Leedskalnin, he lived and quietly built these giant monuments by himself out of stone. And he would move these stones at nights with pulleys, levers, chains. I mean, he had hoists and all kinds of stuff, but some of these stones were too large to be moved by just one man. But he died before he could really reveal his secrets, or rather those who can understand it probably already do, and what they call the profane probably just don't get it, which is most people. It has to do with frequency, vibrations, and everything has to do with frequency and vibration. So let me say first off, I'm not here to provide any solid facts or evidence, so if you're looking for that, look elsewhere. You might just find somebody who's telling you that they're telling you facts and proof. Of course, they're probably full of shit, because many of these things just are not understandable, at least what I'm about to talk about here. This is a matter of dark versus light, positive versus negative, and understanding they're all inclusive, that they're not mutually exclusive. You cannot have darkness without the light. These are sliding scales. Dark and light being the example, because there's pure light and pure darkness. I'm not even going to get off into that tangent. My first description here is all is vibration. And what I wrote, I'm going to try to read what I wrote so I can try to decode it for myself and others to say, exactly what it says. Crystals transfer energy to the user in vibratory form. Okay. Now, my belief is that quartz and other crystals, the way that they're built is through an orderly arrangement of atoms, molecules rather, and this is what gives the crystal its shape. I was researching snowflakes because I wanted to understand, okay, I know that it starts in a hexagonal shape, and that's the natural form it wants to take because of the molecules. This is why a snowflake takes a hexagonal shape, because the molecules take on that form. So why does it dendritically branch out from all six sides the same? It has to do with its exposure and the fact that these molecules arranged in certain orders tend to follow certain patterns when they're branching out. Because for me, I was under the impression that snowflakes were created by vibration or frequency that we couldn't maybe understand. I had to study it deeply to understand it, so I wasn't just making up fairy tales to try to explain how it worked. So it's on the molecular level, and it builds up until it finally, hits the ground, melts, does whatever it's going to do. Sometimes the snowflake may have a nice branching pattern, then it hits a warm patch and it melts that, and then it starts over again, and this is how you get all the different ridges, and this is why they're all different. And we know that snowflakes are completely different from each other. And there was a thing recently where they said that two snowflakes could be alike, but there's no possible way that they could have the same atomic alignment. They may appear as the same from the outside, but electrons can be flipped in different directions, and there's no possible way that they could be the same. So here we are, snowflakes. Trillions and trillions of snowflakes. No two are the same. What creates this building on the snowflakes? Well, it's an amplifying of it's a building, like a dendritic building off of this center hexagon, right? Okay, so my thought is that atoms attract through frequency. Now, I don't understand how this works, and this is something that I'm not even going to pretend. I'm not going to, you know. So, what is dark matter? Okay, now dark matter to me is the opposite of gravity. Dark, not to me, this is just what science says, that it's the opposite of gravity is dark energy. It's pushing the universe apart. Otherwise, everything would collapse. We don't understand how it works. And they've tried to come up with all these different particles to explain it, but a lot of scientists postulate that there's these patches of dark matter in space, like these pockets. And it's maybe so, but I'm going with my own theory here that dark matter is all around us. It's everywhere. It's the very polar opposite of matter, so therefore it's everywhere. I'm not talking about antimatter, which they say cancels out matter, but rather dark matter, or dark energy, which is repulsive gravity, is what I'm defining it as. That somehow these ancient rock movers, stone movers, people like Edward, understood how to use frequency to create a field where there was an alignment of the molecules or atoms within the stone that repelled gravity. This could only be done through understanding the mechanics and frequencies to which atoms respond. Well, back to crystals for a minute. And crystals, people have used them for healing for centuries, thousands of years, and claim that they hold these mystical powers. And I've done a lot of research on crystals myself because I found them fascinating, but didn't want to fool myself. And placebo effect's great. It's a wonderful thing, but that's not what I'm after. I want to know the truth. And the truth is that crystals are amplifiers of energy. That's how they grow. They grow in a form that is consistent. It's a pattern. So, think of that pattern like an antenna, or like a small antenna. Now, the Earth frequencies can be picked up on these antennas. Now, this isn't just like fairy tale shit here. This is a fact. There's a reason why they use quartz in watches, okay? They call them quartz watches because they use a small piece of quartz for the movement of the watch. And the vibration that's put off by that keeps a consistent time. This is how they use it. This is why they use jewels in watches. Jewels keep time. It's funny how we haven't really been able to... I guess it just amazes me that we haven't brought that into more of the public attention. You know, that crystals are amplifiers of energy. We know this, but still we kind of laugh it off when somebody has crystals in their hand and says, look, I can feel the energy, or, you know, use this for healing. Why not? Well, it's invisible. We can't see it. It must not exist. That's just how we think. So, here's my point, is that Edward Leedskalnin, when he was building his, whatever you will, his castle, coral castle, he had many strange devices that he used, such as jars with wires wrapped around them, and various frequency generators and large cables that went up to a box on the top of his tripod, and nobody really understands how it works, or if they do, they're keeping quiet about it. And my question is always, you know, well, leave my questions till later. Sorry if I'm being very jumpy here. I have a lot of subjects that are all tied into one idea. So the snowflake has the 6 points of growth, you know. Well, many different crystals have different amounts, different types of growth, different patterns, and this is all depending on how they vibrate or resonate. And there's no reason to believe that humans can't resonate in the same way, on a different degree. Not on that atomic scale, like something small that's what they call I can't remember the name of them, but a material that's made of all one molecule, rather than a human that's made of several million. So my thought is this, that gravity is God, and antimatter is evil. That's just completely generalizing this here. That God is what puts things on earth, if you want to. That word God, not as a person, not as an entity, but as a force, as an all-encompassing force, the all. the grand architect. And antimatter, or dark energy, being evil, not because it's dark, but because it repels, because it pushes life apart. Think of it as entropy. Antimatter could be the entropy of the universe, that gravity wants to bring life together and allow it to grow and evolve and flourish. But it's always being pushed apart by internal forces and pulled by external forces that we don't understand. And I'm not afraid to talk about this stuff because I don't feel any dumber than the scientists out there postulating some of these theories that just are ludicrous to me, you know. Yeah, the Big Bang must have happened. Sure. Why? Because science tells us it happened. Yeah, of course it came from a little pinhead-sized thing. It just blew up in the middle of nothing. Sure, why not? Once I learned that the way that we know this is through the background radiation. How do we know we're understanding this right? And also through the redshift as the galaxies move away. Now a new discovery is showing that the speed of light may vary depending on galaxies and gases and whatnot, which is throwing physics on its head, making it think that maybe we're not so sure, you know? And that's okay. That's what we need to remember, is we are not sure. We don't know this shit. We're humans. Why should we expect to understand space? But if me saying that, there's going to be one guy who's going to be like, we understand. We know. We know. We don't. We don't know shit. So, there's these things called advanced protons, which they consider them the time-traveling protons. They actually go back in time, and these are the ones when they've done these tests. And yes, this has been proven in a laboratory setting where they've been able to show that certain events are really predicted by the atoms themselves. The intention of the observer, or this is how you get into the observer affecting the experiment. That the intention of the observer can affect the experiment itself, and what you expect to see can literally go back in time a split second. I won't try to explain it, but I would urge you to look it up because I don't understand the physics of it. I'm not a technician or a laboratory guy. So, what I wrote down here at the bottom: dark matter is an illusion created by interactions between short-lived particles and matter or antimatter. Okay. This is one of the theories of dark matter, that there are short-lived interactions between the particles, that the dark matter is constantly affecting matter, if you will. That it's an ever-going battle. You might call it the battle of good and evil. What else do I have? I don't have anything else, just two more things written down. 2 gravitational charges and ley lines of the electrons on the Earth. Okay, well, think of the Earth as a giant atom, just for fun. And people talk about these energy points, or ley lines, and these grids. And people say that these temples and these buildings were put on sacred sites, and that they well knew what they were doing. Maybe this is possible, but ever since I heard that theory, my first thought was that energy points move. There's not going to be a consistent energy point on Earth that's always there. Even over millions or billions of years, it's obviously going to change as the geography changes, as the planetary poles change. So let's just assume for a minute that there really are energy centers on Earth, vortexes, okay? These areas of energy are going to shift over time. Now, my belief is that ley lines are in part caused by the magnetic field of the Earth and the interactions. We can have certain energetic concentrations from the energy field. This is a fact. The magnetic field of the Earth wraps it up, and there's these lines, invisible lines of energy around the Earth that protect it. And they say that they believe they spread out about 30 feet from each other, that these lines really hit. They're like these waves, these energy waves. If you shift from one place to another, you might find that your health is better, let's say. People have claimed to move to a different location and their cancer goes away, showing that they may be resonating improperly with the environment that they're in. Now, this is all speculation on my part. I'm not trying to say this is fact. But I believe it. And I believe that different energy areas creates a different feeling, and anyway, have different benefits or ailments for other people. So these ley lines, or these energy centers, move around the Earth, just like electrons move around an atom. If you look into how an atom works, it's not like the electron spins around the atom. This is the oldest and most outdated mental picture we can have of atoms, is a proton and neutrons and electrons spinning around it really fast. It's just, but we can't get that out of our heads because that's what they draw, because it's simple to see. You don't want to write that here's the center mass, which may have no mass at all, and somewhere between here and here is an electron that could be at any one place at any one time. Electrons are a suggested idea. They're real, but what I mean is that an electron itself isn't an item that just is here or here. It can be anywhere depending on how it's utilized. This is how electrons are shared and exchanged, and atoms decide to come together or repel. On that level, on the quantum level, everything just falls apart. What we know about physics, it just completely collapses. So it makes it fun for people like you and me to sit here and come up with our own ideas, on what's really going on out there. This stuff is fascinating to me. This is mental alchemy in the way of trying to sift through some of the lesser metals to try to refine the ideas, to understand them. I think that the crystal point is very important. If I were going to take anything out of this discussion that I just rambled on about, I think one of the most important things to remember for me personally is that, moving stone is a great idea. Moving stone is fun. Sure, the Egyptians could have used it for raising their pyramids. Maybe Lead Skelton knew how to do it too. The question we now have to ask is, how is that going to benefit us? Well, that's an obvious one. In other words, many of the knowledges and things that people talk about that they want to know, the truths they want to know, I step back and say, if you did know the truth or the answer to that, how would it help you in any way? And I find that most of them come up short, such as, if you could prove that this exists or that exists, how would it assist you? And many times it wouldn't. But with proving and understanding antimatter or floating stones, that's a pretty obvious one. If you knew how to make a stone repel against the ground, at least to an extent, and then you could direct it, that would save many energy problems. I mean, I don't even have to explain why that would work. But I'm picturing these atoms in the bottoms of the rocks, and then, or let's just say, this book, and the atoms are just, all of the atoms are affected by their surroundings. And the table, same thing. The atoms are affected by their surroundings, but they're holding each other together by their own charge. If you could find a way to negatively charge this book so it floats across the surface, that would be levitating. Now, they've done this in laboratory settings under supercooled conditions or under extreme, with certain compounds, or using certain magnets, not magnets, but certain metals. And they've been able to float certain things in chambers. But we're talking, can you apply this to anything in daily life? Could you say, okay, let's hit this rock with this frequency so we can float it over here? And for years, my theory on the Egyptians has been that they moved their stones with using some sort of a levitation, using harmonics and resonance and frequency. And when you look at things like Stonehenge, even today it's still a wild mystery, because I think that the rocks that were used were brought from something like 200 kilometers away, which was ludicrous because they could have easily found local rock that was just as good, but it just wasn't quite the same kind. I don't know if it was andesite or what that they used. I've researched too many ancient sites, and there's too many different rock types, basalt and andesite and granite. But the one thing that they all share, many of these stones share in common, is that they're all piezoelectrically, they are affected. They have they have quartz in them, a lot of quartz in these rocks that have been used for many of these things. This is why people think that the pyramids were used as energy centers, because supposedly the outer casing was made of a material that reacts with the underlying granite rocks that creates an energy field or whatnot. Now, all of this is totally possible. It's plausible. I don't doubt that the Egyptians had a purpose for building these pyramids that was beyond Khufu's tomb. I mean, And that's assuming the Egyptians built them at all. I'm not going to get into that. Obviously, they were not Egyptians because Egypt didn't really exist yet, but call it what you want. People that live in that area built the thing. No, it probably wasn't aliens. Yes, it was men and women and children and who knows. People built the pyramids. The question is how. And my thought is that they used Stonehenge and the pyramids were left as major markers to show future generations that this knowledge can never be lost. It should never be lost. It should be reacquired. So everybody's out there seeking this hidden knowledge, but really it's right in fucking front of us. The question is, how do we decode it? We found a lot of these, like I talked about the nano springs that were found in the Ural Mountains in my last video, and fascinating stuff. They found out that they seem to fit the golden ratio. Like this, there's a golden ratio that seems to fit in nature. They call it the golden mean. And there seem to be these underlying patterns, like the Fibonacci sequence, which kind of underlie much of nature. And I think that seeing these patterns helps us to understand the larger patterns. In other words, as above, so below. If you can see what's going on in front of you, you can not only understand the quantum realm, but you can understand the macro realm as well. You stir a glass of chocolate, or stir a glass of coffee, and watch the creamer on the top spin like a galaxy, right? And you can think, wow, that's just like a galaxy up there. Or you can think, oh, that's just like a spinning atom down there, which I shouldn't say a spinning atom. I wouldn't say anything's really spinning, but rather energized. I don't know. I find it fascinating because when I was younger I thought that, quantum physics and stuff was out of the reach of the average person. But now I see that I can feed off of everyone else's theories and see how confused that many of them are in doing their own research. They're dumbfounded and don't know what to make of it. It's like, well, I'm a big supporter of science because it's helped to bring us out of the dark ages and into an enlightened time where we can actually be free to have an idea. And where I'm sitting here saying, well, maybe electrons are God and nobody's going to bust down my door and cut my throat and burn me at the stake. And this is what happened in the past. Heresy has held us back for too long. People were burned for even talking against the church. And Copernicus and the telescope, which was, the bishop looked through the telescope and said, oh, it's the devil's work, and they banned that for another century. And I'm not going to blame religion for all of our problems, because it's not religion. Religion doesn't exist as an actual item. It's people and superstition and fear. Fear of what we don't know. Because the Middle Ages was a time when a lot of negative things happened, and we really wanted to just live our lives and forget about it. Not have to wonder. We didn't have time for philosophy. We were trying to survive. But here we are now. Our brains are increasing in capacity exponentially because we don't have to use our brain power for farming, and we have a lot more time to think. So the average people like you and me can sit here and actually come up with theories about why matter repels and attracts, and we don't have to feel too stupid about it. I think one of the best parts about it is if I say something that's obviously wrong, a person can present the truth and say, dude, you're wrong. No, this electrons do this, or have been proven to do this. Then I can look at the evidence and see, okay, either the person has taught me something new to add to my arsenal, or the person's just making an assumption based on scientific dogma, which is very often the case. I don't know how many people I've talked to who just think it's an open and shut bookcase, just, oh, we know what's going on, let's move on to the next thing. And we find that we have to revisit old ideas. One of the reasons why science is having a hard time with, all these new discoveries is because we're trying to assimilate them into a current paradigm that we already believe. We already have theories on this and this and this. If we completely abolish our theories, we'll see that things might be a little different than we thought. So, what's my point in all this 25-minute video here? I believe that dark matter, dark energy are everywhere. I believe that the Earth is surrounded by a sheath of dark dark energy that all the planets are, that all matter within space, every asteroid, everything, and even everything within Earth is surrounded by an energy shield, a dark energy shield, if you will. And rocks want to pull together from gravity, yet it's that dark energy that pushes things apart. And it's on a realm that we can't measure yet. It's an invisible energy that we cannot measure. And that's why people scoff at it. But remember that nuclear energy is invisible as well. Doesn't mean it won't kill you. Doesn't mean it won't affect you. Doesn't mean it won't change the environment. But you can't see it. You can definitely feel the effects, but you can't see it. And if you had said that there's an invisible radioactive force that is giving people cancer from miles away, or, people would just think you're a nutcase. But here we are, discovering new things every day. My thought is that eventually people will understand how to combine frequencies and overlap harmonics in conjunction with whatever else is necessary to finally move stone, to where somebody can finally not just go on the internet, but actually hold a meeting and show people and say, okay, I'm going to levitate this stone across this floor. Not for posterity, not to try to get famous, not to get rich, but that people, individuals, start working towards science. Because if you and I put our hearts into it and we do experiments, it's the only way that we're going to really understand it, even if we are told. In other words, when I started hearing about how water is affected by frequency, I went out and I built myself this big speaker box with this containment vessel thing on it, and I filled it with water, and I watched the harmonic resonance as the water vibrates. It's called cymatics. And I did the same thing with sand. I still have the unit, but the point is I did the experiments. I didn't just watch them on a YouTube video or say, wow, that looks neat, that looks neat, that looks neat. Get out and do it. If you've got any type of drive or desire to seek these things, and not everybody does, but if you do, don't be held back by your fear of, whether people think, oh, that's an old experiment, that's already been done. We need these experiments because we need free energy, and we need to understand our surroundings better. And not just as a collective, because people don't trust each other anymore, but as individuals. Be an alchemist. Seek your truth. Take care.